125th Street has experienced a huge revitalization in recent years, and if you really want to step into jazz's past, you're going to want to come right here to 133rd Street. Back in the day, this was known as Jungle Alley and was jam-packed full of speakeasies. In fact, urban legend has it that Billie Holiday was discovered right here. But we really have to wait for the sun to go down to start our historic club crawl. Now, if you're going to talk about the history of jazz up here in Harlem, the very first stop on your club crawl has to be the Lenox Lounge, because this place, opened in 1939, has seen the likes of legendary jazz performers from Billie Holiday to Miles Davis. They've all graced its stage. The Zebra Room has been restored to its former grandeur, and jam sessions go down on Monday nights. But if you're not sure where else you might want to go, you can always count on this guy, Gordon Palatnik, who gives jazz tours here in Harlem.
They say that Billie Holiday was here all the time. They even enshrined one of the seats and put her picture over it.
In fact, right here at Lenox Lounge is where you may bump into Duke Ellington's granddaughter, like we did.
First jazz recording was in New York in 1917. There's been jazz in New York City since before that. When Louis Armstrong came to New York, he came to Harlem, and it's been happening ever since.
Second stop on our jazz club crawl is right here on 125th Street. The place is called Showman's, and it's been in Harlem since 1942. The walls do not lie. All the greats have played here. But what makes Showman's so unique is that it still has one of these.
This is a Hammond B3. It's probably one of the most classic organs that you can play. It's real, it's mechanical, it's not computerized. It makes all sorts of crazy sounds. It was invented back in the 40s by Lawrence Hammond. He kind of stumbled on it. He's actually a clock maker. He made the clocks that hang on walls. But he realized that the synchronous motor can stay in tune, thus keeping the organ in pitch. So that's why it doesn't go out of tune. And it's probably one of the most famous organs ever made, the Hammond B3.
Now, this was a staple in jazz clubs all around town.
Jimmy Smith, Jimmy McGriff, all the great jazz players have played these organs.
Now, if you want to check out the new jazz scene in Harlem, you have to come to Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard, where the jazz is hot and the admission is free. Shrine opened its doors just 3 years ago, but it's co-owned by fifth-generation Harlem resident Christopher Hall. The focus is world music, but on Sunday nights, that's when it's serious jazz jam time.
Folks from all over, retired musicians, they come and they play, it's incredible. You know, they play for 4 or 5 hours straight, and, you know, it harkens back to the 52nd Street days.
Now, New York City boasts an incredible number of great jazz stories about great jazz personalities, dating all the way back to the early 20th century.
You know, Tony, before we can talk about Dizzy Gillespie, before we talk about Miles Davis, Duke Ellington, anybody, I had to bring you to Carnegie Hall.
What?
1912, James Reese Europe, the most important forgotten jazz man, plays here with a 150-person clef club orchestra, and in 1912 does what's considered to be the first jazz concert. 1912! Now, later, he becomes a lieutenant in World War I and becomes the first African-American to see action in France. He leads orchestras in Paris. He's an incredibly formative figure. Now, let's not forget Carnegie Hall itself. Here, Benny Goodman, 1938, does a concert that critics say is the first time that jazz became broadly appealing. Tony, we're here in the East Village on 2nd Avenue, a neighborhood that is known for the jazz clubs in the 1940s and 50s. Right across the street was the childhood home of the great Brooklyn-born composer Jacob Gershwin. People know him as George Gershwin. This child of Russian immigrants plays one of the greatest stages in the world, including Radio City Music Hall. Here at Radio City Music Hall, history is made by the legendary Cab Calloway. Now, Calloway was born in Rochester Christmas Day 1907, and he learned how to sing scat in Chicago under Louis Armstrong. Now, what's incredible to me is that you can see him at the Cotton Club, you can see him here, all over the world, millions love him. But his moment, 1930s, on Walter Winchell's radio show. He gets together with Bing Crosby and Duke Ellington, and they break the color barrier. For the first time on national radio, African American and white jazz musicians together on the airwaves.
Now, one of our biggest jazz icons has to be the great Louis Armstrong. An international star, he toured the world. But where did he choose to call home? That would be Queens.
Mr. Armstrong was, you don't find people like him because he was so gentle, he was so kind.
Selma lived next to Louis Armstrong ever since he moved into this house in Corona with his wife Lucille in 1943. And this former home, now a historic landmark, has been preserved and is open to the public. By the time of his death in 1971, the man known around the world as Satchmo was widely recognized as a founding father of jazz, a uniquely American art form. His influence as an artist and cultural icon is universal, unmatched, and very much alive today. And when you visit the museum, you can see how this man lived. See where he had breakfast every morning, where he slept, and where he relaxed. But you can also hear him. The amazing recordings this man made, personal moments, recorded right here in the privacy of his den.
Lucille fixed something I never had in my life before. She gave me a room and made a den out of it. You know what I mean? That really knocked me out because we couldn't afford no den, and them early days, we better sleep in that room.
He was born in 1901 in New Orleans. By the age of 7, he formed a vocal quartet with 3 other boys, performing on street corners for tips. A family of Russian Jewish immigrants hired Louis to work on their junk wagon, and he bought his first cornet with money loaned to him by that same family.
He could sing as well as he could play. He had perfect pitch. He had an unbelievable sense of balance and logic in his playing. He's unparalleled as a trumpet player.
Coming up with music and dinner for 2 at Dizzy's, along with an historic jazz club crawl for 2, or $100 to blow at PC Richard & Son. Now, starting next week, check us out at our brand new time, Saturdays at 6 on Pix. All right, New York, we have gone in search of the best collard greens, macaroni and cheese, and cornbread, and we've found it right here. Where are we? Well, you're just going to have to stick around to find out.